Episode 85 is here. It's the Average Joe Sports Show. Find us on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Those numbers keep going up. We appreciate it with the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube, Spotify, and iTunes, the AJ Sports Pod, where you can follow on Twitter. Pride of Fairbury back from SEC country. That's Bill Doleman. Gary Sharp, the Iron Horse. Elijah Herbel, the best mustache in radio. Chris Schmidt. I am posing as a
congratulations.
I'm posing as a BYU grad student. How are we feeling on this Friday?
Did they give that award out at the end of the year? The Sports Media Awards, the best mustache in radio. I didn't realize I was up for it this year.
We can create our own. It'll work.
You know what? There aren't a ton of people that just have a mustache. A lot of guys have beards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you might become a trendsetter.
I think so.
I remember last year. So like this, I guess this is like 2 years ago now. Doing baseball umpiring, where everyone thought they're like, "Man, you must really like Top Gun going with the mustache." I'm like, "No, I had this before Top Gun. I set the trend, not them."
I wanted to be in the state patrol, but instead I'm umpiring.
Hey, speaking of umpiring, 4 weeks from today, college baseball starts.
Can you believe that Nebraska, less than a month from now, I think it's February 14th, they'll be playing, is it down in Texas this year to kick off the season?
As a top 25 team.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good
Pretty
schedule.
good.
And I think also less than a month from today, they'll be playing Vandy.
Yeah, I'll take that. I like Will Bolt's aggressive scheduling despite a larger Big Ten. Fellas, let's get into basketball.
Schmidt's not ready to turn the page to baseball just yet. I get that.
You're trying to avoid talking about Husker Hoop here.
Did you not stay up late last night?
I had to cover it. I wanted to lay on some railroad tracks afterwards, but I'm on minimal sleep right now, and I'm a little feisty. So the reality is this. I like what Fred Hoiberg did and said in his postgame, guys. And Fred sat down and kind of peered out. And good dude, great dude, really talented coach. I have no qualms about Fred Hoiberg, the coach, and I have no qualms about what Fred's revamped his Nebraska basketball team to look like, right? But he just peered out in the post game, and I mean, it was kind of a stare through, and then you see his jaw clench a couple of times, and I could imagine what's going through Fred's head. And then, all right, it's my media session, so I've got to be measured, but also deliver a little authority. And the effort versus toughness discussion, that door's now been opened because you've got a basketball team that's pretty old, pretty experienced. They have pieces, they have roles, they have depth for the paint, right? To throw waves of big dudes at you. And Rutgers came in and just with a little New Jersey to them. And Nebraska just didn't have an answer. You were talking under the 16-minute timeout, 13-minute mark, you're up 9. You are up 9 on 4 freshmen starting that have had all sorts of issues. And it could have gone sideways for Rutgers. You're up 9. Nebraska really came out pretty hot. What happens? You take a couple of stupid shots. You don't get a stop. Rutgers hangs around, takes the lead, has a response, and then ultimately they have 2 closers to choose from. Made plays down the stretch where you have no answer. So Rutgers, I believe, is a much better team, clearly, when they've got Harper playing. That's obvious, but we'll see if they go on a run or a tear or stabilize, and we'll see where Nebraska goes. But can't have that loss. You needed to be a 6-2 month, and Nebraska's reeling since UCLA.
Yeah, bad loss, especially when you know you're playing at home. It's a winnable game. You're a favorite. As you mentioned, you were up 9. And, I mean, it stings even more because you look at how you are on the road, and you're not very good. Listen, Nebraska is a flawed team that against 5-out offenses, their style of defense can work if you're not hitting shots. It's a make or miss sport. And the last 3 teams have hit shots. They've hit 48 threes, and Nebraska's defense has gone out the window. And, when you play that kind of defense, you have to play with a lot of energy. And I thought last night Nebraska didn't play with energy. They were lazy on some closeouts. Their guards got sucked into the post. I don't know why they continued to double the post when it wasn't working. Give credit to Rutgers. They hit some shots. I don't think Rutgers is a very good team. I think they have 2 great players. I think they have 2 great players and a bunch of mid-major guys with them. And Nebraska had an opportunity last night. And, Nebraska's a flawed team where there is tape on you, and Rutgers took advantage of it. Good win for Rutgers. Doesn't change my opinion of Rutgers. Bad loss for Nebraska. And it last night may kind of just be who Nebraska is. And they have to have the night where their opponent is off. They don't hit shots, and Nebraska hits at the rim, makes free throws, and also finds a way to block guys out of the glass. 17 offensive rebounds, 12 threes, 85 points. Katie by the door. You're not going to win a game.
And I want to ask the question to Schmidt, because you were there, Schmidt. From watching on TV, it just felt like the crowd was nervous the entire time because they kind of felt like they knew what was coming. Did it feel the same way in the arena?
It was restless is the best way to put it. It was restless when you had a lead and it disappeared, and Rutgers just kept coming. And then, God love PBA and God love Nebraska basketball fan, but if it's under 5 minutes left in a tight ball game, somebody pulls the imaginary fire alarm and everyone starts rushing towards the exits when there's still the game in doubt. So the 300 level, you could have shot a cannon through. Okay, it wasn't packed, it wasn't jammed, it wasn't as juiced as UCLA. But no, I think there's a little bit of frustration from folks post Iowa, and you know what? 8:00 on a Thursday night. You know what? Am I going to jack with parking down in the rail yard or not? And folks stayed home. But yes, it was uneasy because Rutgers just wouldn't go away, and Nebraska didn't put them away, and that's the biggest problem.
Well, and I'm not. This was not a point to say, the crowd needed more life last night to give Nebraska some juice. That's not at all what I'm saying. It's the give and the take of the crowd and the team.
Right.
And
that's exactly
the team feeds into the crowd, and the crowd then goes and feeds back into the team. And I don't think the team gave the crowd many moments to be like, yes, we're going to feed into the team tonight, because Fred said a lack of toughness. Gary said didn't feel like they always had that effort. Kind of felt the same to me as well, where it just felt like a team that was still a little hungover from Iowa and Purdue, and you tried to give it some life because you're back home. But that's the best way I can describe that performance last night. Is it just felt a little bit hungover. And once Rutgers was hanging around, once you saw Harper and Bailey making plays, you knew what the result was going to be. And we talked yesterday on the show, the afternoon, I should say, Schmidt and myself, Hail Varsity, about how, you know what, it could be really fun if you have an Ace Bailey, a Dylan Harper against Bryce Williams down the stretch of that basketball game. But as he got to the stretch, you went, oh, if it becomes Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey versus Bryce Williams, Nebraska's going to lose this basketball game. Yeah. That felt pretty clear. And those two, tip your cap to them. They're very talented. Kind of reminds me of that Nebraska basketball team from 2021 where, yes, they have a lot of holes, but if the stars start pouring in some points, they can beat anybody, which is how it felt with McGowan's and with Kisei and with, I guess, Trey McGowan's as well. Like, kind of felt like that team where you knew they weren't very good, but if those guys started knocking down some shots, they could beat everybody. That's what I described this Rutgers team as, and those guys started knocking down some shots. The entire Rutgers team fed off of it, and Nebraska was kind of screwed with their lifelessness.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing this Rutgers team grow over the years with Bailey. I'm not sure what year Harper is, but I know as they continue to get their education at Rutgers over the next 4 years, they have an opportunity to really build a basketball powerhouse out east. So I look forward to seeing their growth and maturity in their program. Is this Nebraska team kind of what we expected it to be after last year? You know, Nebraska gets on heaters and they get to the NCAA tournament, and then there's, you know, the 2 steps back or even 3 steps back. You don't have the guy, speaking of heaters, you don't have a guy like Tominaga who can, you know, get on a roll like the dude at Iowa did the other day and pour in 5 threes, gets the crowd in it. Game completely turns around and it intimidates. It'll take another team out of its game. They don't have that this year. And so I wonder if maybe the team that people feared Nebraska might have this year is the one that is manifesting. The non-conference schedule, they had St. Mary's, and okay, that's a good team, but you lost it. Winnable game, but you lost it. The non-conference schedule is not that tough. And Nebraska came through, and what were they, 12-2, the ugly loss to Michigan State. But now you get into Big Ten play, and I'm wondering if, a turnover of 9 people on your roster, you lose your hot shooter and your star, one of the most talked about players, and it's somewhat of a rebuilding thing. You got lucky that Williams and Gary came back, but that's Mast sitting out, that maybe this is what Nebraska basketball was destined to be in 24-25. And if they're going to make to the NCAA tournament, it's going to have to be a tremendous run. They got to steal one at Maryland this weekend, and that's not a favorable schedule. You play on a Thursday and then a Sunday morning, and we've seen what happens with Nebraska on Sunday mornings. Just go back a week ago. They didn't play with much energy last night. They didn't play with any energy at Purdue. So my fear is that this is kind of the team that people expected but didn't hope for. And if they're going to get to the tournament, they're going to have to make a deep run in March in the Big Ten tournament. The backside rotation gets lost. Gary, you're right about the double in the post where you skip past it, you catch on the wing, someone's open. I mean, you're just chasing the ball. At least the last 3 games, Nebraska was 8 of 17 at the rim last night,
and they missed 10 free throws.
You had 4 dunks of those 8 of 17 at the rims. And Gary got off to a great start. Gary got off to a really good start in the second half, and then just wasn't really focused on. Bryce hit some shots, but Esijan even kind of got going a little bit, but their defensive intensity, it's like they understand that they got to be gritty to win. They need to win ball games 70-65, 65-60, upper 50s. That's not sexy or fun or even all that enjoyable to watch, but that's how they've been able to win this season, where they've grinded out some ball games. It's way more fun to get in transition and get a little bit quicker tempo and launch some threes and just run some quick offense. But that's not how they're going to win ball games. And they'd rather, I guess, look good or play more free flowing than hunker down. That's how I look at them.
I mean, they're to kind of to Bill's point, they are flawed compared to last year in terms of the offensive end with shooters. Like last year, they could put 3 to 4 shooters on the floor. This year, they have one consistent shooter from beyond the arc in the mid-range in Bryce. I think Juwan Gary falls in love with the 3. It's either going in or it's not. And if it's not, he still shoots it. I'd like him better at the rim. Berke would like to hit a 3. And if he hits an early 3, that might be the only one he hits in a game out of 9, but he's going to take 8 other 3s. The thing about them defensively, and you look at especially the last 3 games, is it's just the simple pass on defense, because Nebraska hasn't changed their defensive philosophy since St. Mary's. And I remember Randy Bennett after the game, he was asked about how Nebraska plays defense. And he said, once we get in the corner, they're going to trap on the baseline. And all we got to do is skip the ball. And so what have we seen the last 3 games? Those 3 teams that have 5-out offense where they put 5 shooters on the floor. Purdue has changed from having the big man in the middle. They got 5 guys that can shoot it from the outside. Just skip passes. Look at Rutgers last night. It was just a simple extra pass. And Nebraska, just like Iowa and Purdue, were caught out of rotation. And so then you got to go get a closeout, and you're going to be late on that closeout, and guys are getting good looks at the 3. Or, when you get lazy and guards get sucked into the post, you have more wide open 3s. So Nebraska's been off defensively the last 3 games. They've given up 95.3 on the average, 48 threes. People have tape on Nebraska, and Nebraska just simply has to play extremely hard. They got to guard you. Schmidt, you're right. They got to play a boring game. They got to play the UCLA style of game where they keep it in the upper 60s, because I don't think they have enough offensive weapons to turn it into a shootout. But the one thing about Sunday at Maryland is more of a post-oriented team. Now, Queen is the real deal, and they're really good at home compared to Kevin Willard is not very good on the road, but they got to find somebody to pull the parking brake because this feels like this season's going south pretty quick. And there's no real off nights in the Big Ten. Look at last night. 3 underdogs won last night. I mean, Minnesota beat Michigan. Northwestern found a way to win in overtime against Maryland.
And what a game that Minnesota and Michigan game was for anyone who caught the end waiting for the Nebraska game. Fantastic finish. But I do want to ask the question here, as you look back at last season and how it ended with Texas A&M. I mean, what were we saying after Texas A&M, where Texas A&M was knocking down shots and Texas A&M was out-athleting Nebraska? Did Nebraska make the necessary changes this offseason to fix that? That's kind of the question I have right now. And it's tougher to do in one offseason, especially with a place like Nebraska, but that's the reality of the portals. Whenever you do have problems like that, you got to make the necessary changes, and losing Rink for the season probably didn't help, but did Nebraska make the changes that they needed to make in order to learn from what you should have learned against the Aggies last year?
Ideally, you go get a couple of dudes like A&M has or had
Rutgers.
or Rutgers has, but can you get those guys and still have the same type of buy-in and gritty blue collar mentality? Either it feels like you got to pick one or the other, because you've had your eras of the Bryces of the world where, yeah, he's an NBA talent, but the teams are more fluff than hard edged. So you need a combo, and Nebraska has not been able to have a combo at all when it comes to blue collar and then NBA skill.
And to that point, they tried in the portal. You look at who some of their targets were. Just think about this, guys. Take out William Kyle III. Take him out because Nebraska thought they had him. Ends up at UCLA, and you wouldn't have Braxton Mia. So I think you would definitely take that change, because what happens now on offense, Nebraska has some empty calories out there. I'm not going to be as harsh to say black hole, but Bearkay, Mia, Morgan gives you quality minutes, but you're not saying, hey, Andrew, can you go get us, 12 and 9 every night?
He gets hustle bus buckets.
Yeah, they got some empty calories on offense, and like Bearkay, I don't know, guys, what you do with him, because what does he do well on the offensive end? It's not, my God, I about lost my mind last night at PBA. The post up back down, and then he shifts left, shifts right, and there's a baby hook, or he would love to hit threes. All big men want to shoot from beyond the arc. So, I mean, you got some challenges that I think, going back to what kind of is the central focus of this, they are who they are. They helped themselves in November, December, and now Fred's got a way either to have a plan B on defense or squeeze as much out of this team to get to where they want. Because I still think they're probably, 11 in some brackets. Like bracket matrix might have them as 11. Last 4 in. They have a number to go reach, but they got to find somebody to stop this bleeding right now.
Well, you wonder if they have guys that can score and perform for you, but do they have a guy that'll step forward with the stitches and stitch you up? And I don't know that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, like
that.
Sejan finally went 4 for 7 from 3 last night. So that's a shot in the right direction anyway, based on, what he'd done in the last 3 or 4 games.
And Bryce Williams also had a 5-minute stretch in that second half where he kind of put the team on his back and at least kept Nebraska in that game whenever Bailey and Harper were starting to really settle into things.
You can't go 2.5, 3 minutes on a scoring drought. That's on your Husker basketball bingo card, because it happens. And you also can't.
Well, you can't have. So great that Sejan played well. Riley Wooster had a really good night across the board, but do you trust him in the last 5 minutes of the game? Bryce Williams at the end of the game has to have the ball in his hands.
Yes. Yeah.
He can only have and he had one shot in the last 90 seconds, which was a good looking 3, but.
Yeah. And that's just it. Like, they need to call a set or something. I'm going to put my coaching hat on and make sure it is Bryce that is getting the ball and getting downhill on winning time. And that's they also got to be strong with the ball, man. They get stripped. They lose their footing. They are a mess underneath, bless their heart, holding on to the basketball. They're going into contact and either getting stripped or looking for a call that doesn't happen. And they didn't have a ton of turnovers last night, but something as simple as the entry pass when it's a 1-point ball game, you're trying to throw it over a mountain named Bailey. and it's your sixth or seventh turnover of the ball game. But God, you can't have it in the final 90 seconds in a 1-point ball game.
Yeah, I don't think we've kind of discussed this even in the good times this season. I don't think it's a team that is littered with great basketball IQ.
No, and that's yeah. Got to be stronger.
You can't be just dribbling into a crowd.
I think you could say that last year's team did have that, and especially in the way that team was constructed and the way Fred wanted them to play. That's why they did get to the NCAA tournament. I think that there was a pretty good basketball IQ understanding of what they were being asked to do and the way they were being asked to play and who the shooter was, and let him come through if he can. And you had Mast, who I think is a pretty smart basketball player, but they bought the whole thing worked last year. We've changed the identity over a year. It took Fred to really kind of establish that because he had Tominaga, and you go to more of a rugged defensive city league type style, and everybody bought in and played. And because they knew that's the way they had to play, and it got them to the tournament. When you have a roster with 9 turnovers, and I'm meaning in players, your roster turns over with 9 new people coming in, and one of your leaders from last year is going to be sitting out. How do you have continuity in that buy-in and understanding of where we are in the textbook? Or do you have to go all the way back to the beginning of the semester and go through the modules again? Well, by the time you do and you get into Big Ten play, you're behind, and now you're just hoping for pass, no pass.
Well, you don't have much time to get things figured out now because you look at the schedule. I mean,
exactly.
The next two might be as close to must win as they can be because you're on the road at Maryland. Tough. Nebraska sucks on the road, especially in the mornings on a weekend, and it's 11 a.m. on Sunday. Dear God, you got to go get something there. And
I'm pouring a Bloody Mary for the average Joe Sunday live. I'm having a bloody.
and then next week you come back home and you got USC, who has had some bad losses, but they seem to be getting things in order. A good win against Iowa. They went on the road and took down Illinois. Back-to-back good wins from the Trojans. And then, oh, dear God, you're on the road at Wisconsin, top 25. A top 25 Illinois team comes to Lincoln, and then you're on the road taking on a top 15 Oregon team. Dear God, you got to go get the next 2.
Yeah, it's interesting because when this stretch started, it began with UCLA. If you are on Ken Palm, he had Nebraska losing 6 of 8, but still finishing in a good spot, but they would lose 6 of 8, get through this stretch, go 2-6, but then finish up strong. And at the time I went, I don't know. Well, they've lost 3 of those 4 in that stretch, and Elijah Hughes documented the last 4. I mean, there's no off nights in the Big Ten, but Nebraska needs to find that extra guy. Williams and Gary are probably going to give you points every night. I don't know how they're going to get them, but they're going to give you points. Can they find that third consistent score that is going to be there regardless of venue?
And it's supposed to be a Sejan, but that's been hit or miss. And if he's off, who steps forward? We'll see. Grab the mouthpiece and buckle up for Sunday with Nebraska and Maryland. Guys, want to spend a moment on Jack Hoffman, the Hoffman family. Gut punch this week as little Jack passed away, and all of the Nebraska fan base, the people in this wonderful state, but also just across the nation smile when they remember Jack's touchdown run on that spring game, and your heart hurts for the family. But you're also extremely proud of the fight and courage Jack Hoffman, Andy Hoffman, the Hoffman family have provided so many in their battle against cancer. But just a sad situation this week, but a courageous young man that was a big-time Husker fan, loved Rex Burkhead, and fought and fought and fought.
Yeah, we as Huskers fight over the weirdest things, and the Hoffman family taught us about pediatric cancer and what an awful disease it is. And, that's something everybody was unified in the fan base. And I also think during this journey that the Hoffmans let us be part of and will continue to be part of, it showed you how great Nebraska is, the Nebraska football program, what it means, and just the state of Nebraska. And, a young man who showed us so much joy and inspiration, and it just gone way too soon. But his legacy will live. I mean, that moment in 2013 is one we'll never forget, and one that, to this day drives people to find a cure for not only just pediatric cancer, but cancer in general. And
Sure.
that was tough. But it was, we were all around back then. It shows you, credit to not only Rex, but Bo Pelini, and I think Taylor Martinez. If you go back to 2013, man, Taylor's patience and just the emotion of helping little Jack that day. That's what I'll remember, but that's a family. My God damn, that's a tough one.
No,
yeah, having lost the dad, a couple of years ago, but you're right. That's going to be a first family of Nebraska football to a certain extent for a long time. And not that statues are everything, but I would not doubt if there's some type of commemorative statue for that moment outside of Memorial Stadium and the Osborne Legacy Building, because that's a moment that, as tragic as it is now with Jack's passing, but really what a celebration for Nebraska athletics and what it means to the state of Nebraska, where a moment like that, Nebraskans can come together with that family and embrace them and put that warm blanket around them and fight with them alongside for so many years. And so the culture, the character of the state was, I think, certainly on display and has been for more than a decade now. And one of the great things about it, too, is that it spawned moments like that in other programs. They may not be, programs that have the same relationship with the state like Nebraska athletics does, but, a lot of programs have given those Make-A-Wish moments for children and for families who just need something to smile about for a day or for a week or whatever it might be. So I'm happy for that. I'm happy for all of those families too. It's a sad time, no doubt about it. And I think Nebraskans are once again embracing the Hoffman family with that warm blanket and appreciative that they're part of the family.
And Bill, I'm with you, whether it be a statue or you name the north end zone after Jack or something along those lines. There needs to be something in the stadium to honor him, because there's not many people out there, especially in only 19 years, which is that's far too young. But in 19 years, the courage that he showed, the inspiration that he was to so many people. There's people out there that are looking around and they just got the diagnosis and they said, well, I'm gonna fight like hell because I see this little 8-year-old in Nebraska who's fighting like hell. And if he can fight, then I can fight. You have that. You have the great work that the Team Jack Foundation did to not only raise awareness, but the money that they raised trying to find a cure to pediatric brain cancer. Like in only 19 years of life, Jack Hoffman left a legacy that people can only hope to leave in triple that amount of time. That's a special, special thing. And there needs to be some sort of whether it be a statue, as I said, or you rename the north end zone after him, whatever it may be. There needs to be something to honor him, because that is a life well lived, despite the fact that it was 19 years. But the hardship that he went through, the hope that he showed to people, that's special.
He showed true grit and inspired many. So we salute you, Jack, and the Hoffman family.
Again, I give a lot of credit to Bo Pelini. He got to spend time with Andy, and Andy told him about Jack and told him about pediatric cancer. And, for all the gruffness that's out there of Bo, that was one where Bo showed his human side, and that football program embraced that family so much that, Jack went on and Atkinson, West Holt, and played football. And he ended up going to UNK. But Jeff Jamrog, who was on Bo's staff when Team Jack and when the run happened in 13, actually offered Jack a full ride football scholarship at Midland in Fremont.
That's awesome. No, the heart of Bo that's nothing I've ever questioned with him and what the fact he is and was caring, the fact that you've got a guy like Rex that really, really poured his heart and soul into it. And we're all pretty close with Searles, but that that student body, student athlete that, all right, I'm a Nebraska football player, but here's my responsibility because I want to in the community with the outreach. And it was, and it's continued. Not to go completely morbid as we wind down the show, but we remember and smile about Jack Hoffman. We remember and smile about Mr. Baseball, Bob Uecker, Sharpie. And I know you had a chance to meet him. Bill, did you run into the Uke ever?
I don't think so. I was trying to remember if the Brewers had played down in Houston when I was covering the Astros. And I don't think that our paths crossed in a press box. I don't think
my late father helped fund whatever Miller Lite paid Bob Uecker for the Miller Lite commercials in many of the early 1980s. But Sharpie, take it away, dude, with Uecker.
Sad because you kind of knew that last year was probably his last year. If you go back, if you get a chance to listen to his sign off after they got beat by the Mets, kind of in dramatic fashion, I think everybody in the organization knew that was it because he's been battling cancer for the last couple of seasons. And, the players after the game talked like, God, we let the broadcaster down. Guys, think about that. That's an incredible impact that a broadcaster has, that players would think that they didn't win a playoff series against the Mets. They let down their broadcaster. He was everything that everybody is saying about him is true. He was iconic, his personality, and he just made you laugh. And in my time in Major League Baseball, I got to meet him, and he's exactly who he was on the air, in front of a camera, in a Miller Lite commercial, as in Mr. Belvedere when he was being choked by Andre the Giant at WrestleMania. That's exactly who he was. He made baseball fun. He went on Johnny Carson 100+ times, told stories about baseball. He was a character that players wanted him to tell them stories. That's unbelievable. Here's a guy that hit 200 in his career. Now, he might have hit a home run off Koufax, hit 200 in his career, and became one of the biggest personalities in baseball. That just shows you what kind of a person Bob Uecker was. And you guys know this. The baseball announcer is so different because baseball is made for the radio, and you develop an intimate relationship for 162 games. And that announcer is the ears to the team. And Bob Uecker was that for so many that followed the Brewers and all the people that he worked with. And they have an incredible broadcasting crew, from a guy that, some of us know in Lane Grindle, Jeff Levering, Brian Anderson. I mean, you could tell the emotion. I mean, there's the tears. And the thing with Bob Uecker, and this is such a great tribute to him, with Bob Uecker, there's the tears because we've lost a legend, but then you're laughing through the tears because you're remembering everything about him. Yeah. I mean, is he one of the top 2 all-time comedy scene stealers that is not the main character? Was Harry Doyle that in Major League, and Shooter McGavin and Happy Gilmore?
Just a bit outside. I mean, it was brilliant. Yeah. It was so good.
And is that not the most accurate depiction of a broadcaster ever, especially like with a struggling baseball team, where the things that you want to say and the things that you can say is so true. It's just, and Bill being a professor maybe doesn't want me to say this out loud, but there are definitely those moments where you're watching a terrible game and there's the things you want to say, the things where you go, well, I have to be a professional. I love that character because it's so much of just like, well, professionalism's out the door. Here's what the broadcaster is actually thinking.
But I echo all that you're saying about him, but in the bigger picture of announcers in baseball, and as I'm being beamed up again, you think about the era of baseball announcers from the 60s, the 70s, 80s, the 90s, but you had Vin Scully, nobody better has ever spoken into a microphone, Ernie Harwell, Harry Carey, Bob Uecker, Bob Prince. I mean, the number of characters in the booth and the variety of personalities that shaped the game of baseball in the second half of the 20th century, leading into the 21st century. But as Gary said, baseball and radio are married. And even in all of the technological advances that we have today, there's still something romantic about baseball on the radio. And to think of the people who got to grow up with their team in those decades with those personalities, I mean, that is part of the fabric of the game. And you hope that never, ever gets lost. But I'm afraid it's going to be, because most of the announcers of this generation, and look, we're in that, just don't have the same type of, dirt on the shoes personalities that those guys did, except for Vin Scully, who could not be more, high character. But anyway, but to think of the voices that those fans got to listen to, including Bob Uecker, and to be humored by him when their team wasn't very good, they still tuned in night after night. And that's a lasting legacy that any broadcaster and any person would hope to have had.
I love it. I love the story of Uecker walking out. Bob Gibson's like, "What are you doing out here?" "Well, I'm just on my way to say hi to Kurt Flood in center field. I'm not visiting you on the mound." But the team picture that Uecker and Gibson were holding hands and making eyes at one another that freaked out the St. Louis Cardinal brass. They had to retake the team picture. The black man, a white man holding hands and arms around one another just to jack with the photographer. I smile and laugh about that.
I mean, he was a gem. And think about it. Like in the movie Major League, you could have the same lines, but if they were done by a different person, they wouldn't have the same impact that they have so many years later.
I just still laugh. I laugh every time the post game brought to you by. I can't find it. The hell
isn't the word that was all ad-libbed?
I would expect it from him. I mean, it's something that's been in his mind for years and years and years after a bad loss. He's wanted to just go off. Post game brought to you by.
That's what I'm saying. It's the things that goes through a broadcaster's head that they can't say on the one goddamn hit.
I love it. That's funny. Well, that'll wind us down. An abbreviated Average Joe Sports Show, episode 85. Like and subscribe to the Average Joe Sports Show on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod. Gary Sharp, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt.
I think it was Justin who was in our YouTube comments last week saying we deprived him of his hour of the Average Joe Sports Show. So we made up for it on the weekend. We went a little over that hour. We're at 40 minutes today. I think is that close enough to the hour? People forget that the hour shows used to be few and far between whenever we were first starting this thing out. But now we just got so much to talk about that they go on forever.
No, we'll be back at you for a Sunday live at 10:30, Bloody Marys and basketball. So we get you ready for Maryland and Nebraska. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.